Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Law-Splaining the Interwebs. I'm your host, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. Now, I'm coming to you with some breaking election news that is actually pretty big. If you've been following this channel, I've been talking very bleakly about Republican chances in several of these elections-related lawsuits. But today, just a couple hours ago, we actually have a very, very interesting order come up as reported by Ivan here in my Twitter feed. You can see from the Epoch Times, we've got the Pennsylvania judge blocking the state from certifying the election results in presidential and all other races in Pennsylvania. Now, this is a headline, and there are a lot of asterisks going down the page, but let's talk about what's going on. So Ivan here does a very good job breaking down what's going on. The judge blocks the certification of the Pennsylvania election results. He technically, and he covers this, the judge hasn't blocked the actual certification of the results because they already occurred right before this happened, but we're going to talk about that as well. They already occurred. However, they have blocked any potential remaining steps. Now, the question of whether that block effectively blocks the full certification of the election is a difficult question, which I can't answer, and likely neither can the attorneys in the case definitively answer. They'll certainly make arguments either way, and a judge will perhaps have to decide. But they have blocked the remaining perfecting steps. Now let's take a look at what the order says here. So this is the order. This is not in one of the Trump cases. This is actually in the case of candidates for the legislature of Pennsylvania. And if you did not check it, one of these candidates was on a live stream with Tim Pool just yesterday on the 24th, although lots of people were watching that live stream, and if you're watching this, you may have already seen it. Sean Parnell was interviewed by Tim Pool, so you can go check out that live stream if you want. The replay, I believe, is up on Tim's channel. I will link it in the description if I can find it, but Sean Parnell was there. So this is not brought by the Trump legal team. This is a separate action. It's in the Pennsylvania courts, the state courts, which, if you remember, in the Trump action, the federal judge and the defense counsel were all suggesting that many of the claims that the Trump campaign was bringing should have been brought into the state courts rather than the federal courts. This is an interesting challenge, just briefly, and I'll be going over this challenge tonight as it has just become very, very legally relevant. But in summary, Pennsylvania passed a law in 2019. It was a Republican-backed bill with bipartisan support from Democrats, and the bill was to create basically no fault or no excuse mail-in balloting in Pennsylvania. This lawsuit alleges that that is an unconstitutional law. Now, there's all sorts of stuff out there about how Republicans supported this, and now they're trying to call it unconstitutional. That doesn't matter who supported it. If it's an unconstitutional law, then it's unconstitutional. And the basis of that claim is that Pennsylvania has written into its state constitution 4 exceptions for in-person balloting to allow an absentee or mail-in ballot to come through, and that none of those, no amendment to the Constitution has been made, thereby meaning that this law is potentially unconstitutional under the state constitution of Pennsylvania, that it would have required a constitutional amendment to allow for this type of balloting. So that's the underlying basis. Like I said, I'll be doing a live stream at 11 p.m. tonight on November 25th, Central Time, 11 p.m. Central Time. You can come. We'll be going through the lawsuit, the order, the motions, all of that stuff, as well as a promising breakthrough in Nevada. I can't believe I'm saying this, but we'll see how that goes as well. But here's the order. As to the supplemental emergency application to the extent that there remains any further action to perfect the certification of the results of the 2020 general election for the offices of President and Vice President of the United States of America, respondents are preliminarily enjoined from doing so, pending an evidentiary hearing to be held on Friday, November 27th. And then we've also got the remaining results of the election, the legislatures, auditors, everything else down ticket has been prevented from certification or perfecting the certification. Now, what is perfecting? Perfecting is a step that takes place in various transactional procedures in law where you can have a contract, an agreement, or some sort of document created and signed and presumably legally effective, but it needs some further step. Either it needs to be delivered to a person within a particular amount of time, it needs to be signed by two parties, there needs to be some other step that takes place to perfect the actual legally operative document or instrument. So in this case, if there is some remaining step of perfection, Pennsylvania is enjoined from doing so. Let's talk about what's happened, because there's some real shenanigans potentially afoot in Pennsylvania. As you will note, they have announced that that the certification did occur, right? So that has happened in Pennsylvania, but there may be steps remaining, and the timeline of it happening is very, very suspicious. So let's keep going and talk about that. Pennsylvania certified the presidential and vice presidential elections yesterday. In an emergency brief filed before midnight last night, Republican plaintiffs pointed out there was no need to act so fast. Pennsylvania certified on December 12th in 2016. They don't actually need to certify their results until the electors are going to cast their actual ballots. So the certification didn't need to happen this fast. Why did it happen this fast? Oh, I don't know. It wouldn't have anything to do with this election and the judge ordering them to respond by 12:30 p.m. and then them certifying at 11:57 p.m. That wouldn't have anything to do with it, would it? In case you missed it, this lawsuit was brought by Republicans who argued that the Keystone States Mail-It-By-Vote Statute Act 77 violated its constitution. Plaintiffs wrote that the hasty certification may have been meant to preempt the court's review. No, they would not do that. They wouldn't try to subvert the court or preempt it and moot the case. That wouldn't happen at all. Here he's got some quotes from the order I'll show you in a minute. Here he talks about the perfecting steps that the Republicans allege. Again, I'm going to go through all of this in detail tonight, but just as a brief update, here's their application for emergency relief. Let's look at the timeline. This is the important part for the purposes of this video to show just what's going on in Pennsylvania. And I mean, say what you will. Say what you will. Maybe there's fraud. Maybe there's not fraud. This case isn't about fraud at all. And that's what's really scaring the Democrats in Pennsylvania, is that this case has nothing to do with a fraudulently cast ballot. This case has everything to do with whether mail-in ballots are constitutionally permissible at all. And that makes a really, really hard question. All right, so here we go. On November 22nd, petitioners filed an application for emergency relief that was styled as a motion for emergency special prohibitory injunctive relief and a memorandum of law in support thereof, requesting that this court enjoin respondents from taking official action to tabulate, compute, canvass, certify, or otherwise finalize the results of the November 3rd general election. On November 24th, 2020, at 9:57 a.m., this court issued a scheduling order requiring respondents to file their answer to petitioners' application for emergency relief by 12:30 p.m. on November 24th. The executive respondent's brief in opposition to petitioners' motion for emergency special prohibitory injunction claims that the application for emergency relief is now moot because the secretary certified the results of the November 3rd election in Pennsylvania for president and vice president of the United States, and Governor Tom Wolf signed the certificate of ascertainment for the slate of electors for Joseph Biden as president and Kamala D. Harris as vice president of the United States, and the certificate was submitted to the archivist of the United States. All right? Now, they're going to argue that there's more stuff that happened, but here, reports of that certification activity started surfacing in the media around 11 a.m. on November 24th. Pennsylvania and Nevada certified Biden wins over Trump November 24th, 11:02 a.m. Now, they go on to say that they weren't required to do that and that their action to do so appears hasty and appears to be in response to this lawsuit in an attempt to preempt the court's order and to moot the results. And let me humbly suggest that absolutely, without question, I believe that that's true. And that's not an invalid thing. It might look bad, but it's not invalid to try and preempt the court's order by simply doing the thing you think the court will say you can't do. Because once you've done it, they now can't say you can't do it. Does that make sense? Because you've done it. So now you have a higher burden for your opponents to get the court to overturn the action that was done. A preliminary injunction is an injunction, and that injunction can enjoin for a period of time or indefinitely, and can be fought and lifted on the preliminary injunction merits, which heavily favor defendants. Although now what they're going to have to ask is, can the court undo a certification once it's done? So that's why the Republicans are working here on overtime to try and prevent the certification from being legally operative in the first place. If they can prevent that, then, that's a big win. Whether or not the court can undo a certification once done is a different question about the court's power to interfere in a political process like an election. So we've got a big fight brewing in Pennsylvania. There is really shady stuff coming from the Secretary of State and the governor acting seemingly in response to this action. And the underlying legal questions are actually really good. And it's a darn shame that the Trump legal team had not been pushing this earlier. It's really a shame that they had not looked into this possibility and pushed on this much sooner, because this actually appears to have potential to change the outcome of this election. The question of whether or not they can raise this challenge will, of course, be argued, because this procedure has existed for, since 2019. Should they have raised this challenge prior to the election taking place? Those are questions the court will have to ask. But at the end of the day, if it's unconstitutional, then it's unconstitutional. The next step is, will the judge strike that law down for the next election, or will he invalidate this election? It is important to note that a preliminary injunction meets, you have to receive a preliminary injunction, you have to meet a pretty high bar of showing a substantial likelihood of success on the merits, which means that at least on the face of the document as presented, that there's a real possibility of succeeding in your underlying lawsuit, sufficient for the court to step in and say, okay, we got to hold off on this because they might actually win. So that is very big news out of Pennsylvania. Again, come check out the live stream tonight, 11 p.m. Central Time. We'll be talking about this. We'll be talking about the Nevada case, which just got a green light to go to depositions. Again, very big news, unexpected news for the Trump campaign. But we'll see how everything shakes out in both of these cases. Come check it out. Hope you found this informative. Have a good night. Oh yeah, hit like and subscribe. See you guys in a bit. Peace. Peace.